Historic Formula 2, the stepping stone to Formula 1 throughout its era. And we are racing here at Silverstone with cars that are from the mid-1970s. Ready to head out onto the Grand Prix circuit. And the engine's already fired up, cars heading out. Big field of 29 cars with Tim De Silva, who had a throttle cable fail on him yesterday when he was right in the thick of the action. Unfortunately, the grid basically formed from what happened yesterday. He will have to start right at the back. That's the car that will be on pole, will be car number 21, the Martini of Ben Mitchell. The French manufacturer were very successful in Formula 3 and Formula 2 in the 70s and into the 80s and indeed into the 90s, but it is the blue and white car, Ben Mitchell, who against the head and against the weight of opposition took victory yesterday, predominantly in this period to the end of the period that we're showing here in these races. The 1978 March 782 with the BMW engine was the de facto go-to dominant force. In yesterday's race, it fell in favour of the Martini, so some great racing from Ben Mitchell, but surrounding him on the grid will be a whole host of marches, so he will have plenty to do. And Alistair, he is sort of fighting on his own there, the march, the dominant force in terms of numbers here as well.
Yes, and one march that you might expect to see right at the front, well, not based on yesterday's result because he retired, but you might expect to see racing at the front during the race would be Andy Smith, and sadly I don't think Andy is going to get out onto the grid. Spoke to him after the race yesterday. It was a wheel bearing failure that took him out. If you were here yesterday or you watched live stream yesterday, you will remember that Andy was dominating the race in his recently rebuilt Eddie Cheever March 782, but a wheel bearing failure, so not seeing him today.
Well, there is a march on the front row of the grid. That's Matt Watts in his March 782. That's the white car with predominantly white with the BMW Motorsport colours on it. Then in third place, the orange car of Mark Mercer, and that is a Ron Toronac design, the RT1. Ron Toronac cut his teeth designing cars for Jack Brabham, and in fact the Brabhams in the field will also have been Toronac designed cars when he was still at Brabham, because that was a previous generation. But Ron designing Formula 2 cars, the RT1 was his first. The RT2 then went on to be very successful in later generations of Formula 2 with Honda engines, and the RT3 became the car to have in Formula 3 into the 1980s, pretty much through into the 1990s as well. So the designer of the third place car, the orange car, Mark Mercer, Ron Toronac, is his first independent design, setting up his own company. Fourth on the grid, Martin Wood, car number 94. Now that is another March 782, and again using the Motorsport livery, but this time very little white. It is predominantly blue, red and purple, so that's another March. Fourth place on the grid. Clive Wood will start in fifth position, car number 30, another of the Derek Bennett designed Chevrons. This is a Chevron B28. And in sixth place, Phil Hall, car number 44. I was going to say 14, car number 44. That's another March, gold Warsteiner livery on his car, and that's a little older than the cars in front of him. That's a 1975 March 752. Now, we're seeing cars with a more 1960s look. The cigar tube, there you can see the Warsteiner March on the big screens, and those of you watching along online or at home, that is the car in sixth place of Philip Hall. Some of the older cars you can see from the late 1960s period, including cars like number 12, Steve Weller's Elfin from 1968. A couple of Brabhams you can see there as well. Ross Driver in a blue and yellow 1971 Brabham BT35. And as the cars complete their second formation lap, busy working heat into the tyres. There's Philip Hall in 6th position. Now, it shouldn't be too many problems working out who's who and what's what in this race. It is a single driver, no pit stop race. Breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief in the pit lane. Should all remain relatively quiet, and with a 20-minute format, so a real sprint race. No time to settle in, you have just got to get after it immediately. So lights off, safety car will pull in. This is the end of their formation lap. So they got half a lap out from the pits and then a full formation lap. These cars with slick tyres and aerodynamic wings do need time to build heat in the tyres and the brakes as well. You can't afford either to be cold in such a short operating window. Race director is ready to get us underway. Ben Mitchell leads the field to the line to start the second race at the Classic for historic Formula 2. The Martini that won yesterday takes a decent start, but much quicker around the outside. Matthew Watts, the white, red, blue and purple, March 782, a very quick start. It was a bit of a raggedy run down to the line, but the march of Matthew Watts got a good run. He takes the lead. Ben Mitchell in second place. The orange car in third, number 14. That's Mark Mercer. And then a bit of a squabble behind, but it is Martin Wood who comes out in front with his March 782. There's a Brabamoff and another couple of cars getting tangled at the back of the field. We've got half a dozen classes in this field for historic Formula 2 cars, and here's the challenge for the lead. Already the Martini of Ben Mitchell having a go at the lead, but Alistair, that was a pretty good start from Matthew Watts. He wasn't alongside the Martini, and now the Martini has got back in front as they come underneath us. It will be the French car that leads.
Yes, absolutely, as they come along the old, what was the pit straight for the Grand Prix circuit originally, down into Cox Corner. Wonderful shot there, and a great overtake there at Luffield, Brooklands and Luffield from Ben Mitchell in the Martini, the Mark 1922 Martini against the March 782 of Matthew Watts as they go into the Beckett sweepers. And probably the tyres not fully up to temperature, and perhaps another full lap before they're absolutely happy that they can lean on those tyres. But Ben Mitchell, I won't call him young Ben Mitchell anymore. I got told off last year for calling him young because I've seen him racing for so many years, but he's obviously got a year older each year. Ben Mitchell, very experienced, and taking this Martini through Stowe Corner with the car that really defines late Formula 2 cars of this period, and that's the March 782, a very, very quick car indeed.
Matthew Watts following in the wheel tracks of the blue and white Martini car number 21 with the fob livery, at the factory colours on the march with the BMW M Sport colours. M Sport, or the M division of BMW, of course, celebrating their 50th anniversary this year, so a particularly apposite time if he could claim victory here. But the Martini looks like it is running away, so Ben Mitchell certainly producing the pace. He's not fastest in all sectors, but he is stringing together a very quick lap now, and this might be too big of a margin. Well, let's take a look down here in the loop. There's a little bit of 2 into 1 doesn't go, tag from behind. I think the car that did the tagging actually was Mike Bainbridge's Brabham BT35, that blue car with the yellow wings, and Tim De Silva escaped that, and coming into the pits, I didn't see who that was as they came underneath us, only caught the rear view. But, the car in the pit lane, looks like it might have been Mark Hazel, car number 28, which is another March 782, but it didn't look like that at the time.
And a faster driver coming through is the yellow Stobel sponsored car of Graham Ridgway. Now Graham, quick driver, but had a problem yesterday, started in 25th position on the grid, and also the David Tomlin car, number 70. We're looking at that now. That's the Motul Rondell M1 from David Tomlin, who we saw out in his Sierra Cosworth yesterday as well. Had a busy day, but he also had some problems yesterday. Where did he start? 12th on the grid, so he's coming through from 12th. But watch also the 77 right at the back of the picture here, the Stowball sponsorship on the front of the car from the period sponsor of Graham Ridgway, number 77, just diving round the outside into Stowe, but not able to make up another place there.
Yeah, bright yellow car, Graham Ridgway, very easy to spot, isn't he? Now here we go, here's a different battle of different eras. You can see the development of these two cars, from the sort of lobster claw nose to the much more shovel nose car coming past. So car number 70 there, that is David Tomlin in the Motul Rondell, the car built in France, Motul M1, and run by Ron Dennis's Rondell team. Henri Pescarolo among the drivers that race for him in period, and of course that was Ron leaving the Brabham team where he started his work as a Formula 1 mechanic before taking over McLaren with the MP4 project, McLaren Project 4. And there through goes Tim De Silva. So Tim De Silva in that pale blue car with his Gitan livery, following the march through the field.
And the march, the 782 march, started at the back because it's a different driver today. So David Shaw drove yesterday, finished well, but Greg Caton has taken over today in car number 4. So that's why he is coming through from the back of the field. So the result of yesterday's race set the grid for today. So if you had a problem, you're at the back, or in the case of Greg Caton, if you didn't drive yesterday, you're at the back. So he's coming through in the Polafac sponsored car with the BMW M stripes on the side, the car number 4.
Yeah, making good progress through the field, coming up behind 72. Now that car had a bit of a 71, is it? Had a bit of a problem yesterday, and in fact had a bit of a problem on Friday as well. He had to qualify out of session. He was qualifying in amongst 1960s car, that blue and white machine. Now then, here's a change for third place. The orange car of Mark Mercer being passed by Philip Hall. So Mercer and Hall, that's a change for third. The gold car just getting in front, as the fast cars from the back of the field are already well into the top 10. So there you go, there's the result of that pass. The gold Warsteiner car of Philip Hall up to third place. He looked very racy right from the start. Mark Mercer in his orange chevron down to 4th spot.
A lovely livery on that, appeared on sports cars as well in period, and very, very attractive gold colours used on a number of cars, and being followed, having just passed the number 14 Mark Mercer Ralt RT1, the front of the Brabham. We saw this, and as Martin Haven called it on the screen, the Brabham just ran up the back of another car. Yeah, I think the other car might have been Julian Stokes's Techno, which was spun out, but the Brabham running with that damaged wing, and doesn't look altogether like it's going to stay where it should do.
The nose is coming off, isn't it? And I think actually if he doesn't pull off, he will be given the black and orange flag, because that is about to part company with the car at any moment. Because they're not dependent on the aerodynamics, it's probably not actually doing anything other than making a horrible noise, and that sort of groaning vibration you get through the car when something's dragging on the ground. But it's not pretty, and if it does fly off, then that's going to be very bad news, I'm afraid.
And we've lost Matthew Watts, number 9, the March 782 that started on the front row. He's disappeared down to the bottom of our timing screen.
Now somebody's chugged into the pit lane below us, and that was not him.
That was Stokes, I think.
So yeah, Ben Mitchell with a growing lead now. Ben Mitchell has set the fastest lap of the race. He's backed off the pace by a full 2/10 on the last lap, from a 29.440 to a 29.640. So 2/10 off his fastest race lap pace, but he now has a very handy advantage, and that means that pass that we saw of Philip Hall on the orange Ralt of Mark Mercer, not an orange chevron, the orange Ralt of Mark Mercer, was for third at the time, now becomes for second place. And I do think that Brabham is going to have to visit the pit lane. Now then, here's an all-March 782 battle. Car with the white nose, Greg Caton, car number 4, coming from the back of the grid, as he said, taking over the car that David Shaw raced yesterday, or raced for part of yesterday's race at least. And right in front of him, car number 94, Martin Wood. So 2 ex-factory March BMWs. And at the side of the track, 24, Nick Pancisi in a 72 March Formula 2 car. What a difference. I mean, look at that, with a slight shovel nose but single wings compared to these cars of just 2 seasons later. Very, very different. And through goes Greg Caton. He is having a cracking race. That is him up to 4th place from 29th on the grid. We might be looking at putting him in a driver of the day context, I think. This is a big drive from him.
And the car slowing there on the screen is the number 24 Nick Pancisi car. That has huge history in period, driven, as you can see on the side of the car, by great super Swede Ronnie Peterson. This is the actual chassis that Ronnie Peterson drove, but unfortunately and very unusually, the very reliable car, this Nick Pancisi, unfortunately retiring. Marshall's coming out to his aid immediately.
Yeah. Ronnie Peterson was driving in Formula 1 and Formula 2. He was a March factory driver, basically. More problems. And this is 71 Chris Willey's 1975 Chevron. Again, the big wide nose to get maximum downforce before really aerodynamic front wings were the thing to have. Ronnie Peterson raced a lot of his early career for March. And then, of course, a highly successful, if rather shorter than anybody would have liked, career in Formula 1. Now back with our race leader Ben Mitchell, and the gap continues to grow. He's eased off the pace quite a lot, and that may be to a degree to do with some yellow flags around the place. And the battle for second continues to rage. The leader's on his own, but Philip Hall in the gold car again coming under pressure from Mark Mercer. The Ralt driver has not given up at all, has he?
No, the Ralt designed by Ron Toranak, and the Toranak, the T of Brabham BT, Brabham and Toranak. So after he left Brabham, Ron Toranak set up the Ralt company and started to design cars, which then became very, very successful indeed. And this, the RT1 Ralt being driven, the red car, number 14 by Mark Mercer, and he's in 3rd place. And right behind him, the white car is not a lap down. That is Greg Caton, who started last on the grid, car number 4. So Greg Caton from 28th place now moves into 3rd. Wow. Again, what a huge day he is having. This is, don't forget, this is not an hour-long race. He's not gradually caught them. He's done this in 12 minutes, 11 minutes so far of the 20-minute race. We've still got 8 minutes remaining, and it looks very clear that Philip Hall in the gold March 752 is also going to fall prey to Greg Caton. He's going to come from last on the grid. By the end of this lap, as he goes to go the long way around the outside at Stowe, he is very likely to be in 2nd place. Now that is demonstrating why the March 782 was such an influential car in several drivers' Formula 2 careers. It is blowing out a little bit of smoke or maybe a bit of coolant at the back, but either way it is absolutely flying, and there is one car that remains stopping Greg Caton going from last to 1st, and that is Ben Mitchell, and it does look like it's an insurmountable gap. Mitchell 20 seconds ahead of Hall, who's now down to 3rd at the beginning of the lap, and 7 minutes to go, so maybe 3 more laps. I wonder how much of an inroad into the lead Greg Caton can make. Now Ben Mitchell clearly has just eased off a fraction, but he's come back up to a 2-minute 0 lap, so he is lapping quickly, but so too is Greg Caton. Greg's last lap, which included 2 passes, a 2-minute 0.6. So this car is absolutely flying. Car number 4, white with the BMW M stripes down the side, and the yellow helmet of driver Greg Caton.
Keep an eye on him, he is absolutely flying. Keep an eye too on the amount of oil that's coming out the back of the car, Alistair.
Yeah, that seems to be getting worse, doesn't it? So we'll very much keep an eye on that. And it may seem like an insurmountable gap, somewhere in the region of 20 seconds, but if we've learnt anything from the Classic at Silverstone this weekend, it's never give up. Because we've had retirements on the last lap. We've had 2 retirements almost on the last lap in the closing race of yesterday. And just comparing Andy Smith's time yesterday, fastest lap time in the race yesterday, with Greg Caton's, and actually Andy Smith did a 1:57.8, so he was somewhat quicker than anybody in this race. But Greg Caton, as you've said, is as quick now as the leader. Yeah. But unfortunately some 18 or so seconds behind.
Yeah, he needs to be 5 seconds a lap quicker, doesn't he, rather than 5/10 or even 500ths. There is the leader, and I'm sure Ben Mitchell has been given a sign from the pit wall last time round that he is no longer on his own. I'm not quite sure if they've got the traditional Ferrari fast and slow signs on the board. Occasionally you think they might be quite useful, and particularly now in modern racing not so much, because you've got radios. In these cars you don't have radios, so you do rely on your pit board. And there's car number 14, and right behind him is car number 3, Tim De Silva, again from the penultimate row of the grid. He was the last starter barring Greg Caton. Tim De Silva said, well, let's just see what we can do. Well, what he can do right now is attack the red-orange car of Mark Mercer for 4th place. Now, if you'd said to either Greg Caton or Tim De Silva, do you think a podium is likely? Likely? No, probably not, but here we go. He's making the pass for 4th. The car in front of him, the gold car, is in 3rd place. That's Philip Hall. So we could have podium finishes from pole and from the last 2 cars on the grid. I don't think that happens very often.
Certainly not. Sort of a John Watson moment, isn't it, where he came from the back of the grid a couple of times in Grand Prix racing to finish on the podium and even win a race. So we're watching now the white, looks white from here, but it's actually light blue, isn't it? The number 3 Timothy De Silva Chevron B35, and there's another car I mentioned earlier on, Graham Ridgway, the number 77 yellow March 742 with the stable sponsorship, and he's up 19 places as well. So it's lots and lots of cars coming from the back in this race, but most notably the car that's now in 2nd place of Greg Caton from last on the grid.
Well, Mike Bainbridge doesn't want to come into the pit lane, clearly. He is in Class A for our older cars, and he's in a tight battle with the car that's just in front of him, car number 16, Jeremy Kane's March 712, that is the class leader, and they were only a second apart, so that's why Bainbridge does not particularly want to pit. It looks as though the officials are relatively happy for him to continue. The class leader has just gone a little further ahead of him, but there is one of our Class A runners, and at the moment he was at the beginning of the lap in 2nd place in that class, and there was only a second, 1.5 seconds between them. Meanwhile, here is the chaser, Greg Caton, 21 seconds behind Ben Mitchell, and Ben Mitchell responding well. The last lap Mitchell was actually 1.4 seconds quicker than the chasing Greg Caton, but at the moment we need to focus our attention probably on the battle for 3rd, and that is the gold car of Philip Hall and the pale blue car of Timothy De Silva, who's gone by him, and also Mercer being passed by 77, the yellow car of Graham Ridgway. It is all going crackers here. This is like the end of yesterday afternoon. It's sort of the end of term feeling. There is De Silva, he's up to 3rd, Hall down to 4th, Ridgway up to 5th, Mercer down to 6th. So Greg Caton, 3 of our final 4 starters on the grid are now in the top half dozen.
Great driving.
Absolutely crazy.
And your friend Mike Bainbridge, I'm afraid, has brought the Brabham into the pit lane, so a retirement for Mike Bainbridge.
He may well have been shown the black and orange flag. We had a couple of those at the end of yesterday's race. Alex Brundle was flagged in because his T70 was blowing smoke. It was oiling the cylinder, and he did respond to that. The man who ended up winning the race had been black flagged quite a lot earlier in the race, or black and orange flagged for a call into the pits for a mechanical problem, because he too was blowing smoke. He didn't pit and ended up on the top step of the podium. I'm not quite sure how that ends up working out. However, this race on the final lap now, Ben Mitchell in the Martini way clear of chasing Greg Caton. There is the third place car of Tim De Silva, Philip Hall behind him in the gold Warsteiner car, the Gitain livery on the number 3 car of Tim De Silva. A much less French blue than you're used to seeing with a French tobacco livery sponsorship, but that's the way that the car is. And then in 5th place, from 25th on the grid, Graham Ridgway. A mere 20 places made up for him. And in 6th place, Mark Mercer from 4th in his orange Rolls. So there's been some change around in this final 5 minutes, Alistair Douglas. Some really crazy topsy-turvy. If you had to pick a podium off the grid, I'm not sure we'd have started at the back row of the grid and worked forward.
Not. No, we'd have been mentioning people like Ben Mitchell and Matthew Watts, wouldn't we? And not
Yes.
Not Greg Caton necessarily, or Tim De Silva. So great drives from them up, and also a young teenager, Sam Harrison, as well, up 13 places
Wow.
in the Lola, where he had technical problems yesterday and retired. He's up 13 to 13th.
Well, there is the yellow car, Graham Ridgway, on its final lap of the race. Ben Mitchell is a long way ahead of Graham, some 25 seconds up the road. Mitchell is not going to be caught. We have seen mechanical carnage on the final lap in several races. Let's hope that that is not the curse of the commentator. Well, there is the car that is currently in 5th spot, sweeping through the Beckett's S's. There's Greg Caton, but ahead of him, and the checkered flag will be awaiting Ben Mitchell. There is Tim De Silva in 3rd, he's into Stowe. So Ben Mitchell coming to the line. There's Greg Caton in 2nd place. Are we not seeing Ben Mitchell? Has Ben Mitchell not taken the checkered flag? There is Ben Mitchell. Has he taken the checkered flag? I think he has. Yes, he has. Greg Caton takes 2nd. Tim De Silva in 3rd place at the line, inches ahead of the gold car of Philip Hall. And what was the margin between them? Yeah, just under 2 seconds between them. So Ben Mitchell was so far ahead of all the action. He takes victory in the 2nd of our historic Formula 2 races, and against a sea of March opposition, which should have had at least numerical supremacy, Ben Mitchell taking a tight win in race 1 on Saturday, and that was a very much more considerably comfortable win in race 2 on Sunday. And right from the start, Alistair Douglas, Ben Mitchell looked to have the pace on everybody around him, not maybe on everybody else. Let's face it, if this car, Greg Caton, had started, well, not in 29th, but even in 9th place, we might have had a real battle for the win from him.
Yes, I think ultimately Ben Mitchell had the pace, but of course what you don't know is if Ben was forced to run that pace for the whole race, whether A, he'd have made a small mistake, or B, the car would have given up on him.
Well, here is our race winner, Ben Mitchell. Oh, the rest of the cars heading back towards the pit lane below us. And they will be heading in a double race winning weekend then, already in the Formula Juniors for Michael O'Brien, and we follow that up with a double race winning weekend in Formula 2, the category that really took over from Formula Junior as the springboard into F1, and Ben Mitchell winning both of them in this car, the pretty French-built Martini. And as you might expect, he is absolutely delighted with that. Well, that was a very much more calm and considered race from him. He really got his sleeves rolled up yesterday. It was all arms and elbows, as it was indeed for Michael O'Brien in Formula Junior yesterday morning, but a big smile on his face. I don't think anybody who wins 2 races in a car of this kind of nature is going to feel particularly disappointed about it. And Tim De Silva, well, he was just looking to have a good fun and learn a bit more about the car before the race. Well, he had good fun, learned a bit more about the car, and gets a podium for his efforts. So the young American in second place, sharing a whole host of cars with his father Harindra this weekend. Not a two-driver race, and I don't think driver changes really work in a car. There is car number 4, and that is Greg Caton, who has conked out on the slowing down lap. So that's just past our viewpoint, just out of Copse. So he doesn't return to the pit lane. It's going to be a while before he gets back to the podium, but he finished in second. Tim De Silva in third, Philip Hall in fourth place, and in 5th place again, right from the back, Graham Ridgway. The second historic Formula 2 race of the weekend has the same winner, Ben Mitchell. So everything is exactly as it was on Saturday. Well, not exactly. From 29th and last on the grid, Greg Caton, a stunning drive to take second. Tim De Silva third from 28th on the grid. Philip Hall finished fourth, ahead of Graham Ridgway, who started in 25th. Mark Mercer and Martin Wood, who started on row 2 of the grid, finishing in 6th and 7th. Some huge drives from the tail of the field in what was a very comfortable win for the Martini driver Ben Mitchell, but was all action for just about everybody else. Well, right from the start it became clear that the blue and white Martini of Ben Mitchell was going to be a force to be reckoned with. In our Class A, Mike Bainbridge having contact early on, not able to claim class victory. On the opening lap, Ben Mitchell got ahead of Matthew Watts in his March 7.82 as the ex-Ronnie Peterson March 7.22 failed to complete the race as Ben Mitchell ran away. Drivers who had started from way in the back of this near 30 car pack tore through the field. Graham Ridgway in his yellow machine carving up the order, the 74 march, but it was Tim De Silva who came through to third, and Greg Caton last on the grid from 29th to second, who had the crowd on their feet as Ben Mitchell claimed his second win of the weekend.